In 12.10, we actually saw a complete shakeup of the meta, with Nikita actually buffing the hell out of a lot of different types of AKs. This also hit the 545 platform quite heavily, meaning a lot of the different guns here are now so much stronger than they were before. So let's talk about what changed in this platform and what happened to some of the different assault rifles. We're going to be clearing up some misconceptions as to where is the best place to spend your money on this caliber right now. Now, of course, we're going to start off with the three kings of 545, the RPK-16, the AK-74M, and the N. Now, if we look at the difference between all of them, on the far right, the AK-74N wins out on ergonomics. The main difference here is we look at the different types of recoil. The 74M and also the RPK-16 are the same in terms of vertical recoil, but actually lose in comparison to the 74N on the far right. The main difference being that the RPK actually now has worse horizontal recoil and recoil across the board than the 74M and N when built to meta spec. Whereas a lot of these AKs didn't stand up to the RPK even slightly before this patch. The main difference now is when you're distinguishing the 74M, it is really just the king of budget. Now you can cop them for really good prices on the flea market, and the 74N being slightly more expensive. That makes the 74M a more attractive towards the budget end, whereas if we look at the two side by side, I mean the 74N is not only more expensive, but in reality not that much better. So the 74M here is the king of budget, and the N being the late game. Now in the mid tier, around 100,000 rubles for guns and attachments, the RPK once again outclasses the 74M here in ergo, but loses out mainly in vertical recoil, and the major difference once again is that horizontal recoil, which I actually genuinely believe to be the worst kind of recoil. So how does this recoil translate to a real life application? If we look at the AK-74M, it actually has completely and utterly usable recoil with really nice grouping. The RPK being very similar in terms of vertical recoil doesn't climb so much, but that left-right movement of the horizontal recoil can be quite disorientating. You can extend the barrel for about 18,000 rubles, which does make a decent difference, but got nerfed quite heavily this patch. If you put the long barrel on, it does outclass the 74M, so this is something you need to consider, maybe spending an extra 15 to 18,000 rubles. Now the short AKs gets kind of interesting. I do love the AK-105, sort of like the 104 and 7.62, but it wins out in terms of recoil over its brother, the AKU. And the thing is, it trades in terms of ergo either, so you aren't really making any major sacrifices. The main problem with the AKU is that horizontal recoil being much higher, but the benefit is that it is better in CQB, having the fastest fire rate out of 545. Now, if we compare the two in slow motion, you can see that horizontal recoil that I'm talking about. That jump from left to right can be very disorientating, jumping from shoulder to shoulder. So this sort of type of recoil is very hard to counter during your spray. You cannot simply pull left and right the same way you could simply pull down. So I find that this recoil being one of the hardest for me to actually adjust to, and the reason that I believe the 105 is actually better. Now to save your time so I don't talk your ear off, I'm going to be throwing out some attachments here. The JMAG being the king of compensators, but the SRVV and the PWS actually being just as good for a lot cheaper. So these two are something you need to consider if you want just a tiny bit more recoil and save out a lot, especially if you don't have the flea. The handguards, the Troy is actually the meta, but the VS24 is a much better option in terms of the flea market, especially if you don't have the traders maxed. This is because the rail is actually a lot cheaper and more accessible. Whereas the Troy wins out in terms of recoil, it is very, very expensive to buy this handguard and guide if you want to get that lowest recoil, especially if you don't have your traders unlocked. The CMRD actually got nerfed, which is kind of crazy, and we also got a new change to the B30, making it a really, really good choice, especially because you can now slap a different dust cover with it. Now, the dust covers in general changed as well, which is really weird. The Academia Basher now reduces recoil. The best part about the B30 handguard is it allows you to actually throw on the B33 dust cover. This dust cover actually reduces your recoil the most. For grips, you got stuff like the Magpul AFG grip being a great value option here, as well as the fact that when it comes down to pistol grips, not a lot has changed here. But you do have a choice between the Zenit RK3 and the Aeronox Scorpius, with the Scorpius being a much cheaper effective option. The stocks haven't changed much. I mean, we have a butt pad that got increased, and all of the original stocks, including the folding ones, did get buffed. That being said, I would not use any other stock other than the Zukov S or the UAS AK here, especially on the hard stock options. There is no point switching over to a buffer tube and adding all of those because they are personally a waste of money. If all in all, if you do want to build these AKs, I would use the Bastion dust cover and the VS24 handguard as it has great ergo and looks really awesome. I usually use the forward shift on the front of this to boost the hell out of the ergo because I personally believe that high ergo is something that is more important to me. I usually only ever run 30 rounders with these guns because of the check speed of these mags, and I try to keep the package nice and short and sweet with a whopping 81 ergo on the standard AKN that I run at this moment in time, as well as the fact that that vertical recoil at 49 is virtually non-existent. So if you are looking for a high ergo, high impact gun with virtually no recoil, the AK-74N right now is amazing. Hey guys, that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video or learn anything about modding, feel free to subscribe. If there's a type of gun you'd like to see me do this for next, let me know in the comments down below and I may consider it. Thank you so much for watching to the very end, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.